Hey guys, tonight we're going on a journey that starts right where you are tucked under a blanket, eyes fluttering, the faint hum of a fan whispering against the wall, but your mind is still buzzing, isn't it? The soft blue glow of your phone screen, the phantom buzz of a notification that never came. You're trying to sleep, but somewhere, deep in your DNA, your ancestors are still huddled around a fire, eyes wide, listening for wolves. Because sleep, this thing we chase every night, isn't some timeless human default. It's a patchwork mess, stitched together by necessity, fear, bad ideas, and a lot of guesswork. And if you think you have it rough with your memory foam mattress and noise-cancelling earbuds, you probably won't survive what's coming next. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and local time in the comments. I want to know what part of the world you're not sleeping in. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You blink, and it's thousands of years ago. There's no mattress, no fan, no pillow. Unless you count a curled-up animal hide under your head, you're lying on the dirt, or maybe a little moss if you're lucky. Around you, others sleep too, some snoring gently, others twitching in half-dreams. But not everyone's down for the count. One person always stays awake, poking the fire, ears twitching like a rabbit's. Because in your version of the Stone Age, you don't just go to bed, you negotiate with darkness. There are no clocks, no calendars, no alarms, but you have the sun, the moon, and a gut feeling that tells you when you're too tired to do anything except curl up and stop thinking. You sleep when it's dark and stay alert when you can't afford not to. And that's the beginning of what scientists call segmented sleep. Something you might still experience today when you wake up inexplicably at 3 a.m., stare at the ceiling, then drift back into a second round. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer tribes like the Hadza in Tanzania or the San in Namibia have found that they don't sleep in long, solid blocks. People drift off, wake up, shuffle around, fall asleep again. There's a kind of night rhythm, more jazz than symphony. And because their huts or camps aren't private, everyone's sleeping patterns overlap. There's always someone awake, always someone watching. Historians still argue whether this fractured, flexible approach to rest is our natural state. Some swear by it, pointing to modern insomnia as proof we've messed it up. Others say the stress of ancient life predators, starvation, in-laws made consistent sleep impossible, and we've actually evolved toward a single, uninterrupted chunk of nighty night. But while you're busy navigating prehistoric REM cycles, here's a fun tidbit. Early humans might have used sleep to bond, just like chimps do. Sleeping near others gave warmth, security, and maybe even sparked early dreams. Imagine your great-great-great-grandperson snoring softly next to a cousin while a saber-toothed cat prowled the bushes. Adorable. In a tooth and claw sort of way. Now fast forward a bit. Civilization dawns. Farming begins. People stay in one place longer. And spoiler, you still don't get to sleep well. Because if you think prehistoric bugs were bad, just wait until someone builds a city. But before we leave this smoky little campfire, let's appreciate one thing no one's checking email. No one's binge-watching cave flicks. No one's sacrificing sleep for productivity hacks. Here, sleep is survival, not self-care. And that's the secret thread that runs through all of history's bedtime stories. We don't just lie down because we are tired. We sleep because the alternative is being eaten, freezing, or collapsing in the fields during planting season. Not exactly a lullaby, but effective. And maybe that's something you can carry with you under your quilt in the 21st century. The idea that even when you're tossing and turning, even when your mind won't stop spinning, you're part of a long, twitchy tradition of humans doing their best to rest. While keeping one eye open, you roll over and find yourself under a different sky. Still no roof, no central heating, but now the trees have thinned, and firelight flickers across darker skin, leaner bodies, and sharper instincts. You're among the hunter-gatherers nomads whose whole lives are choreographed by the sun and the scent of prey. Here's the deal, you don't have a bedroom. What you have is territory, open space, maybe a lean-to of sticks and leaves. And you don't go to bed, you collapse, when and where you can, as the world decides. Your body knows the rhythm, wake up at dawn, follow the herds, forage until dusk. At night, you sleep light, maybe curled up next to a sibling or partner, maybe tucked against a tree, maybe just out in the open. No memory foam, no warm socks, just animal skin and instinct. And yet, somehow, it works. Modern sleep researchers have studied traditional societies like the Hadza of East Africa and the Tsimane of the Amazon to see what sleep looks like without smartphones and fluorescent lights. And guess what? These folks don't get more sleep than you do. They average 6 to 7 hours a night, just like modern people. But they do it with way fewer pillows. Quirky twist. The Hadza don't even try to sleep all at once. Their nights are staggered. At any given time, someone in the group is awake, tending the fire, checking for predators, maybe just lying there, thinking about that one time they missed a shot at an antelope. It's called sentinel sleep. And yes, it's exactly what it sounds like. One person's light sleep protects everyone else's deep sleep. The group forms a living rotation of drowsy bodyguards. There's something weirdly comforting about that, unless you're the one who drew the short straw and has to stay awake with nothing but darkness and bugs. Historians still argue whether this kind of communal sleep was more functional or cultural. Was it about safety, warmth, boredom, or just the fact that mattresses hadn't been invented yet and lying on the ground all night hurts like hell? Either way, the dreamscape of a hunter-gatherer wasn't always peaceful. Ever tried sleeping after eating raw mammoth liver or walking 15 miles through thorny brush? Yeah, you're out cold in 3 seconds, but that doesn't mean you're safe. Here's a fringe fact to snack on while you doze. Some researchers believe dreams may have evolved as a threat simulation system. You know, like the world's first anxiety app. Your ancestors dreamt of falling, fighting, fleeing, and woke up better prepared for the real thing. Sleep wasn't just rest, it was training. So you twitch, snort, and roll onto your back while your subconscious reenacts a wild boar attack in Dolby surround sound. You're a prehistoric simulator, and your brain is downloading updates in nightmare form. Meanwhile, around the fire, someone shifts. A woman gets up to tend to a crying child. A man scans the horizon for movement. The stars remain still, but owls stir and hyenas call. You pull a hide tighter over your shoulders and drift back down. You don't know what time it is, but time doesn't matter. The dark will end when it ends. Another light joke. Alright, imagine trying to explain to these people that you lose sleep over not having enough likes on your vacation post. They're dreaming about woolly rhinos, and you're sweating over a comment thread. We've come so far. And also, not at all. But here's the thing, even though you're shivering on the ground, even though your sleep is broken and bug-bitten, and definitely not OSHA compliant, you're part of something ancient, something bigger, something that works. Because sleeping like a caveman isn't about being unconscious, it's about trust. You sleep lightly because someone else is watching. They sleep because they trust you will, too. And in that fragile net of awareness and drowsy companionship, something called civilization quietly begins to form. So when you're lying awake at 3 a.m. next time, staring at the ceiling, maybe you're not broken. Maybe your brain remembers nights with no clocks and no walls, just a fire, some snoring neighbors, and the deep, unblinking night pressing close on all sides. Now roll over. The next stop has bricks and beds and chamber pots. You blink again, and now there is a roof, sort of. Clay tiles above your head, stacked precariously, creaking every time the wind shifts. You're in ancient Rome now, and congratulations, you've just rented a room in an insula, the Roman version of an apartment block. Don't get too cozy. The walls are paper thin, and your upstairs neighbor owns goats. You're living in a city of over 1 million people. Rome is noisy, smelly, and always awake. And your bed, a wooden frame with a rope lattice and a sad excuse for a mattress stuffed with straw, feathers, or whatever someone could find that didn't bite back. Forget blackout curtains. You sleep with a thin cloth across the window, which might as well be open air, moonlight, torchlight, and the glow from late-night wine shops filter in. The streets echo with the clip-clop of donkey hooves, the slurred songs of tavern-goers, and the occasional ruckus from a drunken brawl or a startled chicken. You stuff a wad of fabric in your ears and try to dream of marble baths. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The ancient Romans did have a concept of sleep hygiene, sort of. Elite Romans believed in sleeping on the right side to aid digestion and prescribed quietude and a cool environment. The philosopher Seneca even wrote about how loud neighbors could ruin one's peace of mind. So, yes, bad roommates are a 2,000-year-old complaint, and the really lucky Romans. They lived in domos, single-family houses with bedrooms tucked away from the street. These had real beds, real servants to fluff your pillows, and the luxury of silence. But you, dear listener, are not rich. You're on the 5th floor of a rickety tenement where fire is a nightly threat and the chamber pot is too close to your face. Fringe detail for the night. Romans sometimes shared beds with strangers when traveling, or even rented spots by the hour. Think of it as ancient Airbnb with way fewer rules and way more fleas. Sleep was communal, not necessarily affectionate, just efficient. You squeezed into beds with relatives, servants, or fellow travelers. Privacy. Not a thing. Personal space. Try again. Historians still argue whether Roman sleeping patterns resembled today's monophasic habit one big sleep, or if they, like their medieval descendants, experienced segmented sleep. Some Roman texts describe waking in the middle of the night to read, eat, or bathe. Others imply uninterrupted sleep was ideal. The debate flickers like an oil lamp, low light, high ambiguity. And speaking of oil lamps, try sleeping while one flickers in the corner. The shadows play tricks. Your own toga looks suspiciously like a burglar. You hear a rat scurry across the floorboards, and remember that your neighbor's dinner might have attracted more than just guests. Want a Roman sleep hack? They believed dreams were messages from the gods or warnings from the underworld. So, when you do dream, and you wake up sweating because your teeth fell out in the forum, you might rush to a haruspex, a priest who reads entrails, for answers. Can't sleep, just pop over to your local dream interpreter. We've definitely downgraded to melatonin gummies. And now comes the part you didn't expect sometimes. The poor didn't even have a bed. Slaves might sleep on straw mats in the kitchen. Laborers rolled up in cloaks on hard floors. If you were unlucky, and many were, your sleep came in short bursts between shifts of carrying water or grinding grain. So you lie there, heart beating a little too loud. You can hear a neighbor coughing through the wall. Someone drops a jug. Below, a cart rumbles by, and a dog barks like it just discovered betrayal. You're tired, but sleep is no guarantee. Not here, not now. And yet, somehow, your eyes do close. Maybe it's the wine, maybe it's the exhaustion, maybe it's the momentary quiet as the city finally exhales. But just before you drift off, let me offer a modern joke. Imagine telling a Roman that your smart speaker won't stop listening to you at night. They'd say, "You paid for that," and hand you a parrot instead. So you sleep, lightly, uneasily. One eye on the crumbling wall, one ear on the goat above, and somewhere far off, the stars gleam down on the marble domes and smoky alleys of the world's most sleepless empire. You jolt awake, not because of a Roman goat, this time, but because it's midnight, and someone is gently shaking your shoulder, not to alarm you, just to remind you it's time for your intermission. You've just completed your first sleep, and now it's time for a brief spell of being. Awake. Welcome to the medieval night. You blink in the darkness of a small wooden house. The fire has burned down to glowing embers. Cold air slips through the thatch roof. The room is dim, but not silent. There's soft rustling from the straw bed next to yours. Someone muttering a prayer, the clink of pottery, and the rhythmic huff of a pig underfoot. Yes, in many medieval homes, pigs doubled as space heaters. This is segmented sleep, first sleep and second sleep, and for centuries it's just what people did. Most of the Western world experienced sleep in two separate chunks: go to bed at sunset, wake up around midnight, then do a little something, then drift off again until dawn. And what did people do between sleeps? Well, that's where things get interesting. You might say a quick prayer, or a long one. Some devout folks believed the time between sleeps was especially sacred, closer to God. When the world was quiet and the veil was thinner, others would read, or mend clothes by candlelight. Some nibbled on cold meat or bread. A few more, let's say, amorous activities might occur. Medieval texts weren't shy about this, apparently. Midnight was a prime time for baby making. Quirky fringe detail. Some folks used this period to visit neighbors, not in a Netflix and wine kind of way, more like borrowing a candle stub or catching up on gossip, in tiny communities where people lived elbow to elbow. Your business was always someone else's business, and that included your sleep schedule. Historians still argue whether segmented sleep was healthy or just necessary, Did people enjoy it, or did they just adapt because candles were expensive? And going outside after dark risked robbery or a sudden drop into a medieval sewer trench. Some even speculate that this nighttime pause allowed people to process dreams, check their livestock, or on stormy nights, just listen to the rain on the roof and feel marginally safe. But let's not romanticize it too much. That in-between time wasn't always cozy. The dark could be unnerving. Superstitions whispered that the boundary between the living and the dead thinned at night. It wasn't uncommon for villagers to believe demons, witches, or restless spirits stirred when humans did. And if your grandmother told you to stay in bed unless absolutely necessary, you listened. Still, there's something strangely charming about a world that gives you permission to pause in the middle of the night. Imagine getting up at 1 a.m., warming your hands near the hearth, nibbling on some leftover pottage, whispering to your partner in the flicker of firelight, then curling up again as the coals fade. No blue light, no calendar alerts, just night. Your mattress, if you can call it that, is a sack of straw, maybe a woolen blanket, maybe not. You're bundled in layers to fend off the draft. Your siblings are snoring beside you unless one of them is up relieving themselves in a corner pot. Try not to think about it too hard, and while you lie there waiting for second sleep to sneak back in, you wonder how you ever thought sleep was simple. A switch you flipped, a task you completed. No, here in the Middle Ages, sleep is more like a conversation with the dark, sometimes smooth, sometimes cryptic, occasionally interrupted by a priest knocking at the door to collect taxes in sheep. Here's your light joke. Imagine installing a smart light in this cottage. Alexa, turn off the door, and boom, you're burned as a witch. Not the most tech-friendly period. Still, somehow, you settle again. Your breath slows. The fire sighs low. Second sleep begins not with fanfare, just a slow drift as your body remembers it's still tired. This second round is often deeper, the kind of sleep that clutches you hard and pulls you into the dream world. And maybe, just maybe, you dream of a future where people sleep on beds that adjust with a remote, then still complain they're tired. For now, though, the medieval night is still young, and so are its dreams. You're dreaming of feathers and velvet now, not the scratchy kind that poke through your straw bed, but rich, opulent textures, deep crimson, gold thread, the scent of beeswax and old wood. You open your eyes, and congratulations, you've made it to the castle. No, not the fairy tale one. This is a real medieval stronghold, damp and echoing. And you're sleeping like a noble now, which, let's be honest, is mostly about how fancy your bed looks, not how well you actually sleep in it. Your chamber is vast but cold. The hearth roars with logs as thick as your leg, but drafts still sneak through the stone walls. Tapestries hang not just to look impressive, but to block the chill. Your bed raised on a wooden platform is big enough to hold 4 people if needed, and it's covered in thick quilts and pelts that might once have been bears, or still are, judging by the smell. The mattress stuffed with down, if you're lucky, but more often with wool, feathers, or horsehair. It's heavy, it creaks, and you absolutely do not flip it yourself. You've got curtains around the bed, and they're not just for privacy. They help trap body heat, turning your bed into a tiny, insulated tent. You crawl in and pull them closed like you're sealing off your own private world. and it needs to be private, because the castle is alive. Servants bustle past the door even at night. Fires crackle, dogs bark. And somewhere, someone is vomiting wine into a bucket. Mainstream historical fact time in noble households. People didn't always sleep alone, or even with just a spouse. Bed sharing was common. A visiting knight, a trusted servant, even an illegitimate child might curl up beside you. And that's not weird. That's just Tuesday. In fact, beds were so significant in medieval households that they were listed in wills lavishly described, passed down like heirlooms. Your bed wasn't just a place to sleep, it was a symbol of status. The bigger, the better. The more people you could fit in it, the more impressive you were. It's kind of like posting a photo of your vacation home today. Except the home is just the bed. And speaking of visitors, don't be surprised if someone quietly enters your room at night. In some courts, it was normal for counselors or confidants to drop in for a late night chat with their lord. Sleep schedules were flexible when politics or plotting was involved. Fringe tidbit. In the 14th century, the Duke of Burgundy reportedly had a clock in his bedchamber that played hymns every hour to remind him of passing time. Nothing says peaceful rest like hourly Gregorian chants in surround sound. Historians still argue whether medieval nobles slept more soundly than peasants. On one hand, they had insulation, bedding, and servants. On the other, they also had gout, paranoia, and more wine than their livers could process. And let's not forget the constant threat of poisoning. Nothing kills your sleep vibe like wondering if your bedtime goblet of mead was tampered with. Which brings us to the joke of the night. You know how some people say don't go to bed angry in a medieval castle. It was more like don't go to bed anywhere someone can stab you. Safety first. You roll over, buried under layers of fabric so heavy you can barely move. Your chamber is lit by a single candle, its glow bouncing off a gilded cross above the bed. You whisper a prayer not because you're especially devout, but because sleeping in a castle comes with certain expectations. You're meant to be pious, serene, nobly unconscious, but you're also itchy. Because here's the thing, they don't show in medieval movies. Everyone had lice. Nobles bathed more often than peasants. Sure, but that still meant maybe once a week. Maybe. And with all the fur and cloth you're wrapped in, let's just say the little critters are living their best lives. So you lie there, scratchy and stiff, trying to drift off. The castle settles. The guards change shifts. Somewhere outside, a wolf howls. Because of course it does. And you, tucked beneath a bear and beside your cousin's second squire, close your eyes again. It's not exactly comfortable, but it's better than the stables. And the bed curtains do block out most of the draft. And the lice, mostly. Now imagine you've rolled off that gilded castle bed and landed squarely in a much smaller, scratchier, and far smokier home. Welcome to peasant sleep. The bed is gone. Actually, the entire concept of a private bed might be gone too. You're in a medieval one-room cottage, sharing floor space with your family. The dog, maybe a chicken, and a pile of damp firewood. It's winter. The hearth is low. Your nose is cold. And you're trying not to think about the pig snoring behind you. Let's get you settled. Your mattress is a bag of hay or straw. Maybe tucked inside some rough fabric if someone had the time to stitch. You lie down in your linen shift, still wearing your cap to keep in heat. And yes, that itching isn't your imagination. There's probably something alive in the bedding fleas, mites, or the world's tiniest army of straw-dwelling nightmares. Mainstream historical fact in most peasant homes. Entire families shared the same sleeping space. It wasn't about affection, it was survival. One fire, one room, one place to sleep. Parents, children, even visiting relatives, all tucked side by side. The more bodies, the more warmth. You don't complain, you just sleep if you can. And it's not like your day ended with bedtime. You went to sleep when the sun set, because candles were expensive and daylight was precious. You're probably exhausted from working the fields, tending livestock, or mending tools. But even now, your sleep isn't guaranteed. The fire needs tending. The baby might cry. The thatch roof might leak. And there's always a chance your neighbor will pound on the door looking for help with a runaway cow. Now, here's a fringe detail that might make your hay-stuffed pillow sit differently. Some peasants believed bad dreams were caused by night hags' malevolent spirits that crept into homes and sat on people's chests as they slept. Sound familiar? It's what we now call sleep paralysis. But back then, it was supernatural harassment. The solution? Sprinkle salt near your bed, or hang iron tools above the doorway, or just hope she visits your neighbor instead. Historians still argue whether peasant sleep was worse than it sounds. Sure, it was cramped, filthy, and itchy, but peasants also lived with the natural rhythms of sunrise and sunset. Some suggest they may have had more restful sleep than modern folks because they weren't binge-watching shows or doom-scrolling at 2 a.m., though they were probably worrying about next season's barley yield. You roll over on the straw, it crackles. There's a sharp poke in your side. That might be a twig, or a piece of last year's bread someone dropped. You adjust, you sigh, you try not to inhale too much smoke from the dying fire. Light joke time. Imagine telling your medieval peasant friend that you have a bed that adjusts angles with a remote. They'd look at you blankly and say, "What's a remote?" Then they'd cry about it in the fields. Sleep here is a necessity, not a luxury. It isn't romantic or restful. It's survival. But that doesn't mean peasants didn't value it. Some medieval texts mention folk lullabies, herbal sleep aids like valerian and poppy, and even bedtime prayers whispered over children's heads. And while it's true that peasants sometimes curled up next to animals, don't wrinkle your nose too hard. A warm sheep is still warmer than your sibling. Besides, those animals were essential. Chickens meant eggs, pigs meant bacon, cows meant milk. If sharing your bed meant one less freeze-your-face-off night, you did it gladly. But sleep, for the medieval poor, also came with risk. Fires could break out. Roofs could collapse. Raiders could arrive. You went to bed not with a sense of security, but with a shrug. Maybe we'll get through the night. Comfort wasn't the goal. Continuation was. So you close your eyes on a bed that smells like hay, next to a brother who kicked you 3 times already, while your mother snores gently a few feet away. The fire dims. The frost thickens outside the door. Somewhere in the dark, a barn owl calls. And sleep, that ever-slippery friend, tiptoes back into your bones. Now stretch, crack your neck, and imagine waking up before the sun, but not because of a rooster. No, this time it's the sound of soft chanting, the cold slap of stone under your feet, and the hollow echo of a bell that always rings too early. Congratulations, You're a medieval monk now, and your sleep schedule just got brutal. You live in a monastery. Thick stone walls, wooden beams, a dormitory that smells faintly of wax, damp wool, and humility. The room is long and narrow. Rows of simple cots or pallets lined up along the wall, each with a single coarse blanket and a lot of quiet expectations. No privacy, no luxury, just discipline, prayer, and repetition. Your body is weary, your eyes dry, but you rise because the bell insists. It's time for matins, the night vigil, one of the 8 canonical hours, and one that strikes well before dawn. Mainstream historical fact in Benedictine monasteries and many others across medieval Europe. Sleep was divided by prayer obligations. Monks were required to rise several times during the night for worship, beginning with matins around 2 or 3 a.m., followed by lauds at dawn. They might get 4 hours of sleep if they were lucky, and squeeze in a nap during the day to make up for it. Sort of like the original polyphasic sleep hackers, but with more Latin. You shuffle into the chapel, the stone floor cold beneath your feet. The light comes from flickering candles. The only sounds are footsteps and low murmurs. You chant, you kneel, you listen. The rhythm is hypnotic. And somewhere in that space between devotion and exhaustion, your mind floats and... Fringe detail: some monasteries banned sleeping face up because it was considered a lazy or lustful position, so you're expected to lie on your side, like a well-behaved saint. And if that sounds ridiculous, remember some monks also wore hair shirts to avoid the temptation of comfort. Fun times. Historians still argue whether this extreme sleep deprivation had spiritual merit or just made people hallucinate better. Was it enlightenment or just an elaborate way to become sleep drunk in the name of holiness? The answer depends on your view of God, and maybe how recently you've had a full 8 hours. Monastic life was deeply regimented. Bells marked every hour of the day. Sleep wasn't yours, it belonged to the rule. Everything did. You didn't get to choose when to rest. You earned it through obedience, through sacrifice. And yet, there's a strange peace to it. The rhythm of the hours, the comfort of repetition. You're not alone in this. Your brothers rise with you, chant beside you, kneel in the same chill darkness. The schedule may be grueling, but it gives you something. Most modern sleep lacks certainty. Light joke. Imagine syncing your Fitbit to this routine. You slept 3 hours, woke to chant psalms, then nodded off during Vespers. Excellent calorie burn. Might just be the original CrossFit. After matins, if you're lucky, you return to your cot for a second rest. It's not deep, not dreamy, but it's allowed, and that's enough. You lie on your side saintly, of course, and stare at the darkened beams overhead. The walls are thick. The world is silent, aside from a mouse scratching in the rafters. Maybe you dream, maybe not. But your thoughts linger somewhere between spiritual purity and the very human desire to just sleep through the night for once. And that tension, that's monastic life in a nutshell, sacred devotion, constantly butting heads with mortal needs. The morning bell will ring again soon. Lauds awaits, and then the work of the day copying manuscripts, tending gardens, boiling herbs, making ink that smells faintly of fish guts, and through it all, you carry your fatigue like a second robe, but for now, You breathe in the stillness. You're wrapped in wool, surrounded by stone. Somewhere outside, the wind moves through the trees. And here, under this ancient roof, sleep curls around you again, brief, light, but just enough. You're dreaming of candlelight and choir songs when something cold and metal taps your cheek. Your eyes flutter open. You're lying flat on a wooden table. Torches flicker on stone walls, and looming over you is a man in a blood-stained robe, smiling gently as he says, "Hold still." You're not in a monastery anymore. You're in a medieval surgery room and you're very much awake. No anesthesia, no sterilized tools, no soothing music. Just a shaky table, a tight leather strap around your chest, and an assistant telling you to bite down on a stick and think of God. Because here's the truth. No bedtime story likes to whisper before modern medicine. Sleep and unconsciousness weren't guaranteed even during surgery. Let's start with your mainstream historical fact. Up until the 19th century, surgeries were done with no general anesthesia. People were conscious, fully aware as they had limbs sawn off, abscesses drained, or bladder stones removed. The closest thing to relief, alcohol, opium, or a good thump on the head. In some cases, none of those were available. You were expected to grit your teeth and get through it. You're here because of a festering wound, maybe a sword nick, maybe a tooth that went rogue. Whatever it is, the town's barber surgeon has decided it must be last. You lie back as he wipes his hands on something that looks suspiciously like yesterday's breadcloth. Now for your fringe tidbit, barber surgeons didn't just cut hair and boils, they also pulled teeth, set bones, and performed bloodletting with alarming enthusiasm. The barber poles, red and white stripes. They symbolize blood and bandages, a cheerful little reminder that the guy trimming your bangs might also hack off your toe. Historians still argue whether these procedures were more harmful than helpful. Some believe the placebo effect, plus the sheer determination to live, played a massive role in recovery. Others argue that pre-modern surgery mostly just shuffled patients toward a slower death. Either way, you're living it. The surgeon mumbles a prayer. His assistant tightens the strap. You close your eyes, as if willing yourself to sleep. You wish, oh, how you wish you could fall unconscious. But medieval medicine wasn't interested in your comfort. It was interested in results. The blade flashes. You feel everything. Now pause with me here because despite the horror, there's something remarkable about what comes next to your brain. Faced with overwhelming pain, might retreat into itself. Some patients describe dissociative states, a floating feeling, a dreamy distance. In a twisted way, your body gives you a form of protection, not sleep, exactly, but a doorway out. And when it's over, you lie there trembling, sweaty, empty. The surgeon wraps your wound in moss and linen soaked in vinegar. The assistant gives you a sip of wine that tastes like regret. You don't cry, or maybe you do. No one minds. Everyone's seen worse. Light joke. Imagine asking your medieval surgeon if the procedure is covered by insurance. He'd blink, point to your family goat, and say, "That'll do." Back then, sleep was part of the healing, but also part of the risk. A deep infection might drag you into a fevered stupor that mimicked death. People were sometimes buried prematurely. Sometimes. That's why some households tied little bells to corpses' wrists, just in case they woke up. You know, the original snooze alarm. Later, When you're returned to your bed, a sack in the back of the inn, next to a guy with a nasty cough, you try to sleep. But it's not easy. Pain flares with every movement. The wound is hot. Your mouth is dry. But you're alive. And in this age, that counts as a win. Eventually, exhaustion pulls you under. Not peacefully, not gently, but like a wave of numbness crashing over your pain. You dream of firelight and floating, of chanting monks, and clean sheets that don't exist. And somewhere in the haze, you understand why people prayed before surgery. It wasn't just for survival, it was for the hope of sleep. Not death, not agony, just sleep. You wake to darkness, but it isn't the quiet, dreamy kind. It's the kind pierced by footsteps, soft, measured, and deliberate. You are not in bed anymore. You're walking the streets, lantern in hand, cloak pulled tight, and a wooden staff at your side. You are the night watchman, and it's your job to stay awake while the rest of the town dreams. It's the Middle Ages again, but this time you're outside the home, pacing cobbled lanes that twist through crooked timber-framed houses. The torchlight dances on wet stone. You hear the slosh of the river in the distance, the occasional creak of shutters, a cough behind a wall, but mostly it's just you and the silence. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Night watchmen were common in medieval and early modern towns across Europe. Their job roamed the streets from dusk until dawn, looking out for thieves, fires, brawls, or supernatural mischief, armed with nothing but a lantern and a stick. They were the city's human security system, and not especially well paid for it. You call the hour. It's part of the job. 3 of the clock. And all is well, except it might not be. Fires start easily when half the town is made of wood, and everyone insists on using candles to light their bedpans. Rats scurry across gutters. You pass doorways where beggars sleep, curled in rags. In this world, sleep happens wherever you can find it, and often where you shouldn't. And that brings us to a curious fringe detail. Some towns required night watchmen to sniff for smoke, literally. Not just look for it, but smell it. Walk to the source and knock until someone responded. If the house caught fire after that, well, at least you tried. Historians still argue how effective these watchmen really were. Some see them as heroic public servants, guardians of the sleeping poor. Others suggest they were sleepy, undertrained, and usually a few mugs into the night sale supply. Honestly, it's probably both. You walk on. The sky remains stubbornly dark. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks, followed by a hiss and the rattle of a shutter. You approach slowly, stick in hand, only to find 2 lovers whispering in an alley. You cough loudly. They scatter. You shake your head. Another night, another scandal avoided. There's no bed waiting for you, no comfy chair. You walk, hour after hour, until dawn's first smear of light creeps over the rooftops. Then you hand off the lantern to the morning shift, stretch your aching shoulders, and wander toward the town inn to catch a few precious hours of sleep. And here comes the light joke. You know how modern workers get wellness programs, ergonomic chairs, and oat milk in the break room. You got a wooden club, 2 copper coins, and a hearty "don't get stabbed tonight." But somehow, you don't mind. There's something eerie but sacred about these hours. You're the only one truly awake, the only soul beneath the stars who knows what the city looks like while everyone else is dreaming. The stillness has weight, and your footsteps are part of its rhythm. Eventually, you curl up in a corner of the watch house, cloak over your head, boots still on. It's not glamorous, and you'll wake stiff and sore, but for now, your duty is done. The rest of the town stirs, stretching in warm beds, while you finally let your eyes close, and just as sleep overtakes you, you whisper to no one. 4 of the clock, and all is well. You're asleep, but it doesn't feel restful. Your limbs are frozen, your chest is heavy, and there's a weight pressing you down, cold and immovable, as if something invisible is crouched right on top of you. You try to scream, but your mouth won't open. Your eyes flick wildly, but you can't move. The room feels wrong, and then you wake. Congratulations. You've just had a classic case of sleep paralysis, and in the medieval world, you'd probably blame it on a demon. Across Europe, Asia, and pretty much anywhere humans have dared to close their eyes, people have experienced this terrifying half-sleep state. But before we called it by its modern name, people had other explanations, usually supernatural, often horrifying. Let's start with your mainstream historical fact. During the Middle Ages, sleep paralysis was widely believed to be the work of malevolent forces. In Western Europe, people spoke of the incubus, a demonic male spirit who sat on sleepers' chests and suffocated them, often with a side of uninvited intimacy. His female counterpart, the succubus, was no less unsettling. These weren't just metaphors. People feared them. They wrote prayers, wore amulets, and slept with iron under the pillow. The weight on your chest. That wasn't your nervous system misfiring. It was a sign you'd been visited, and it wasn't just Europe. In Scandinavia, they had the Mare, a malicious entity who crept into rooms and rode sleeping people. This is actually where the word nightmare comes from. Not just a bad dream, but a literal night demon. In Japan, it was the Kanashibari, a spirit that paralyzed the sleeping. In Newfoundland, you might be hag-ridden. The world was full of names for the same shadow. Fringe tidbit. Some medieval folk believed you could avoid night demons by sleeping on your side, facing the wall, with a broom near the bed. Yes, a broom, because apparently demons hate chores. Historians still argue whether sleep paralysis incidents inspired these myths, or if the myths shaped how people experienced the paralysis. Was it a terrifying biological glitch, later explained through folklore, or was it cultural fear so powerful it crept into your nervous system and messed with your dreams? You lie there, trying to fall back asleep, but now you're paranoid. Every creak of the floorboards feels like a clawed footstep. You pull the blanket tighter, your candle's flame wobbles. You remember your grandmother's warning, never sleep with your feet uncovered. It invites the spirits in. And the worst part, you can't exactly talk about it. In some places, speaking openly about night demons was seen as inviting them back. In others, it marked you as someone cursed or worse, as a witch. Speaking of which, witchcraft and sleep had a very tangled relationship. Dreams were seen as messages from the divine or the devil, falling into unnatural sleep, possibly sorcery, and if someone else claimed you caused their nightmares, let's just say your odds of being dunked in a river were about to increase. Now, for your nightly joke, Imagine explaining modern sleep paralysis to your medieval village doctor. It's a neurological phenomenon resulting from rematonia and premature cortical activation. He nods gravely, burns some sage, and charges you a chicken. Still, there's something hauntingly poetic about these old fears. The way the body betrays the mind, the way night steals your voice, and the ancient impulse to make sense of it, to give the terror a name, a shape, a story. So you lie back down, on your side, of course, facing the wall, broom nearby. You whisper a quiet charm, not because you believe in it, but because, well, maybe just a little. The fire flickers lower, the shadows grow long. You exhale slowly and close your eyes again, daring sleep to come this time, without visitors. You're dreaming now of silks and secrets, of thick velvet drapes and whispering footsteps behind carved oak doors. You stir slightly in a mattress that smells faintly of rosewater and power. You are sleeping like royalty, or at least trying to, because in the royal chambers of the medieval and early modern world, no one ever truly sleeps alone. Your bed is enormous. 4 posts, thick curtains, fur blankets layered on silk sheets, and a pillow that's somehow both stuffed with goose down and anxiety. The fire in the hearth is low, casting gold shadows on the ceiling beams. But behind the comfort lies the catch: you're always being watched, and not just by God. Mainstream historical fact monarchs often slept in partially public spaces. Yes, their beds were surrounded by privacy curtains, but their bedrooms were fair game. Courtiers, servants, guards, even scribes had access to a monarch's sleeping quarters. There were protocols for when they entered, how they approached, and what to do if the king was still mid-snore. In places like Versailles, royal awakenings became actual ceremonies complete with designated attendants and observers. Even in sleep, you were expected to perform. It's like having a full-time audience for your REM cycles. You shift slightly in bed. The velvet curtains are drawn, but beyond them you hear rustling. A servant adding a log to the fire, another one standing sentry just outside the door. Privacy is a fiction. Sleep is a negotiation. Fringe detail. In some royal households, peepholes were carved into walls or paneling so spies or protective guards allegedly could observe without disturbing. Talk about sleeping under surveillance. The medieval version of being on CCTV. Historians still argue whether this hyper-observed sleep had a genuine political function, or if it was just another layer of royal theatre. Did watching the king rise and fall asleep reassure subjects he was still human, or did it reinforce his distance, making his very snoozing something sacred? Either way, you don't sleep freely. Every dream is wrapped in etiquette. Every sigh might be overheard. Every midnight snack run requires protocol and someone to light your way. Even the bed itself is a symbol. It's likely carved with your family's crest, possibly blessed by a priest, and made by artisans whose names you'll never know. Royal beds were transported across countries for long journeys. Entire carts were devoted to just carrying bedding. The king could travel light, but his sleep didn't. And yes, that bed is yours alone, at least officially, but in truth, that depends. A queen might share the bed, or not. Concubines and mistresses, on occasion, or perhaps no one at all. Royal loneliness is its own tradition. Now for a light joke. Imagine giving a medieval king a sleep tracker app. Your Majesty, Your heart rate was elevated after dream number 3. Might have been the poison paranoia again. Bonus feature, real-time backstabbing alerts. But sleep, even for kings, had its dangers. There were stories of assassins slipping into royal chambers at night, often disguised as servants, poisoned candles, tampered wine, and even whispers of cursed pillows, which is why many kings slept with a dagger under the mattress and a taster on call. Tonight, you're not poisoned, just restless. The fire crackles. Your silk nightshirt bunches oddly under your shoulder. Somewhere, a lute plays faintly down the corridor. You roll over and pull the blanket higher. Outside your bed curtains, a servant coughs. Another whispers. A message is passed to someone in the hallway. Politics, like a never-ending night, flows on while you pretend to rest. And that's the irony, isn't it? You sleep in a palace, but you can't shake the feeling that the real power moves happen when your eyes are closed. Maybe that's why you never truly let yourself drift too far. Still, eventually, exhaustion wins. You sink into the mattress. The silk cools beneath your skin. The curtains block out the worst of the candlelight, and for a few brief hours, you forget the weight of your crown. Now roll over and feel the ground harden beneath you. The velvet vanishes. The mattress evaporates. You are suddenly on a tatami mat, in a room that smells faintly of sandalwood, ink, and oiled wood beams. Paper walls rustle in the breeze. Welcome to feudal Japan, where sleeping isn't about comfort, but discipline. You're a samurai, or at least someone close enough to one that you're expected to sleep lightly, wake instantly, and never ever let your guard down. There is no luxury here, only order. Your bed, a futon, not the modern lumpy couch variety, but a thin padded mat, unrolled directly onto the tatami floor. Your head rests on a small wooden pillow stuffed with buckwheat or rice husks. It's about as soft as a pile of books, but you don't complain. You don't even think about it. You just lie still, calm, ready. Mainstream historical fact: samurai and other high-ranking individuals in feudal Japan often slept with their swords within arm's reach. Some even positioned themselves so that they could draw and strike in a single motion if disturbed. It wasn't just paranoia, it was expected, but this wasn't unique to samurai. Ordinary people, too, followed rituals around sleep. Night was sacred, structured, and observed with respect. Cleanliness mattered. Positioning mattered. You didn't just collapse into bed. You folded into it like a closing fan. Here's your quirky fringe detail in Edo period households. Nighttime sounds were considered important omens. People believed the creaking of wood or distant dogs howling might signal a spirit, a death, or an impending visitor. Some even kept small bells or charms near the bed to ward off wandering ghosts, especially those of ancestors who weren't finished with their family business. Historians still argue how literal this fear of spirits really was. Were they metaphorical spiritual metaphors for guilt and unrest? Or did people truly believe that if you slept in the wrong direction, a ghost might reach through the walls and whisper in your dreams? Regardless, sleep in feudal Japan was rarely careless. You lie on your side, arms tucked, breath slow. Your household is quiet, almost too quiet. You hear the soft drip of water in the courtyard, the rustle of a pine tree outside, maybe a distant temple bell tolling midnight, and if you're traveling, good luck. Inns were communal, much like in medieval Europe. You'd rent a space on the floor in a shared room, slide open the paper screen, and step over a row of strangers to reach your spot. There were no walls, no real privacy, just everyone, arranged like dominoes in sleep formation. Still, there's beauty in the ritual. Before bed, you may have lit incense or written a short poem. Many people kept diaries or calligraphy books by their futons to capture fleeting thoughts in the stillness of night. Sleep was a bridge to clarity, not escape, but reflection. Here's your joke before you drift too far. Imagine introducing a samurai to your weighted blanket. It's designed to calm your nervous system. You say, he stares blankly and replies, I sleep next to a sword. Eventually, your muscles soften. You are allowed to rest, but never too deeply, never all the way. Even dreams are watched, because feudal Japanese culture valued awareness even in sleep. The ability to rise swiftly, to maintain posture, to sleep without snoring or sprawling, these weren't just habits. They were reflections of your soul's discipline. So you dream, but lightly. You feel the floor beneath you, the thin blanket across your legs, the chill of night air seeping through paper walls. You know your sword is there close, gleaming in its scabbard beside the lamp. And if something stirs, you're ready. Your eyes open slowly. You don't remember moving, but now you're somewhere else entirely. A quiet chamber, lit by oil lamps. A heavy sense of unease in the air. Someone nearby is whispering prayers. Not because you're sick, not because it's bedtime, but because you've just described a dream, and in this place. That might be enough to get you killed. Welcome to the world where dreams are dangerous. In many historical cultures, dreams were not seen as random flickers of memory or subconscious sorting. They were messages, divine, prophetic, ominous, and in some cases, criminal. Your mainstream historical fact throughout history, dreams were often interpreted as signs from gods, ancestors, or the cosmos. In ancient Mesopotamia, trained dream interpreters served kings and tracked patterns in tablets. In medieval Christian Europe, clergy taught that dreams could come from three sources: God, demons, or indigestion. So if you dreamed of a fire consuming your house, was it a warning from above, or a sign that you're harboring heresy? Was the black dog in your sleep a literal demon, or did you just eat bad fish? Here's the chilling part. People have been punished, sometimes executed, based on the content of their dreams. In ancient Egypt, dreaming of the pharaoh's death was enough to land you in prison. In Inquisition-era Europe, dreams featuring forbidden knowledge or demonic entities could be interpreted as proof of sin, or worse, a pact with the devil. Historians still argue whether people truly believed in the divine origin of dreams, or whether authorities used dream interpretation as a convenient tool of control. Was it sincere spirituality, or just medieval thought policing disguised as theology? Either way, you keep your dream journal hidden. Now here's your fringe tidbit. In 14th century England, a nobleman once reportedly confessed that he planned a revolt based on visions seen in dreams. Dreams he believed were sent by God. His confession made it into court records. Unfortunately, so did his eventual beheading. But it wasn't all fear and punishment. Dreams were also celebrated, especially when they aligned with social or religious values. Joan of Arc claimed her visions came in dreams. Several kings believed they were visited by angels in their sleep, though notably, those dreams usually occurred after their worst decisions. In many households, especially in rural areas, dreams were shared aloud over breakfast. It was common to consult a local wise woman or priest if the imagery was especially vivid. Flocks of birds, teeth falling out, people rising from graves. Everyone had a theory. Everyone knew someone who knew someone who once dreamed of a wolf and then broke their leg the next day. Light joke. Imagine taking your modern dream to a medieval interpreter. So I was naked at work, and my teeth fell out while riding a flying pickle. They'd anoint you with oil and demand you burn your mattress. Yet even in the fear, there was fascination. People longed to decode their dreams, not just for prophecy, but for meaning. Why did you dream of fire, of rain, of your dead grandmother scolding you in Latin? Were you being punished? Or prepared? You curl up under a thin blanket, careful to lie still. You've trained yourself not to talk in your sleep, too dangerous. The wind howls through the shutters. You hear the creak of someone pacing upstairs. Maybe a dream has woken them too. Eventually, sleep finds you again, and this time your dream is quiet. A river, a rowboat, no monsters, no fire, but even that will need explaining in the morning. You wake to the smell of ink, melted wax, and oddly coffee. You're no longer in the age of swords and saints. You're somewhere lighter, brighter, and much more caffeinated. The Renaissance has dawned, and with it comes candlelit reading binges, sleep-deprived artists, and the slow, delicious rise of insomnia as a lifestyle choice. You are in a city now, maybe Florence, maybe Paris. Outside your window, horses clatter over cobblestones, and the sky is glowing with dawn and soot in equal measure. But inside, your room is aglow with flickering candlelight. You never actually went to bed. You just transitioned from painting to thinking to pacing to sort of dozing in your chair. Because here in the Renaissance, sleep isn't sacred anymore, it's something to be conquered. Let's start with your mainstream historical fact. The invention of artificial lighting began to change the way people slept. With oil lamps, candles, and eventually gas lamps, night was no longer a wall, it was a hallway. You didn't have to stop living just because the sun went down. And with light came nighttime activity. People stayed up to write, read, paint, drink, debate, philosophize, compose sonnets, or plan suspicious revolutions. The nighttime became fashionable, especially among the urban elite. Leonardo da Vinci allegedly slept in 20-minute bursts throughout the day and night, a polyphasic pattern modern productivity bros love to misquote. Whether he actually did that remains debatable, but the idea caught on. Maybe sleep was optional. Maybe sleep was weakness. Maybe sleep was for people who weren't busy inventing helicopters out of corkscrews. Fringe tidbit. By the 16th century, people started using nightcaps, not just the clothing kind, but the liquid kind. Alcohol, warm milk, opium-based tonics. The goal wasn't just sleep, it was enhanced sleep. In some recipes, you'd be out cold. In others, you might dream you invented the telescope 3 years too early. Historians still argue whether the rise of artificial lighting and intellectual culture caused more fragmented sleep, or whether it just made existing patterns more noticeable. Did Renaissance folks really sleep less? Or did we just start writing about it in prettier calligraphy? You lie down now, Finally, on a thin but proper mattress, stuffed with feathers or wool, the sheets are clean, scented faintly with lavender. Your bed is likely against a wall, and above it hangs a crucifix, a family crest, or a sketch of some muscular angel doing acrobatics in the clouds. But you can't sleep. There's too much to think about. The painting's not finished. The letter isn't sent. You had an idea for a poem while brushing your teeth, and now it's echoing like a lute solo in your skull. So you light another candle, scribble a few lines in the margin of your notes, and then lie down again, this time, facing the window, watching the moon fade behind the rooftops. And that, really, is the Renaissance approach to rest. Never surrender completely. Always keep one toe in the waking world. Now your light joke, imagine giving a Renaissance philosopher a white noise machine. It plays waves to help you sleep. They'd say, why would I want fake water when I could argue with Descartes until dawn? Still, even the busiest minds eventually crash. You close your eyes again, soothed not by silence, but by the faint scratching of rats in the rafters and the irregular drips of rain into a cracked basin. It's not peaceful, but it's sleep enough. And maybe, just before you drift off, you dream of something remarkable, a new invention, a new philosophy, or at the very least, a better mattress. You'll forget it by morning, but for now, it's yours. Your dream shifts again, like a lantern flickering in wind. You're still in the Renaissance, but now the room smells like boiled herbs and questionable hygiene. A figure looms over you, not with a sword or brush, but a bag of onions and an open jar of something slimy. Welcome to your consultation with the sleep doctor. Circa 1600, you lie back in a modest bed, head propped up on a hard pillow, as the doctor leans in and asks the crucial question. When did you last eat eel? Because sleep medicine, back then, was a chaotic stew of humors, superstition, and best guesses, and none of it made bedtime easier. Let's ground you with the mainstream historical fact. For centuries, European physicians based their understanding of sleep on Galenic medicine, a theory that the body contained 4 humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, yellow bile that needed to stay balanced. If you couldn't sleep, it wasn't your stress levels or caffeine, it was probably your spleen or liver, or too much wind in your head. The solution? A bit of lettuce known for its cooling properties, or a poultice made of mashed poppy seeds and vinegar applied directly to your temples. Or you guessed it, a light bloodletting before bed. Nothing says sweet dreams like bleeding into a bucket by candlelight. Fringe tidbit: some early doctors believed dreams were caused by vapors rising from the stomach into the brain. So eating beans late at night, a recipe for demonic hallucinations. This also explains the popularity of mild suppers. Heavy food meant heavy dreams. You weren't just avoiding indigestion, you were fending off a psychic ambush. Historians still argue whether Galenic sleep treatments helped or harmed. Some of the remedies had a calming effect, lavender baths, for instance. Others, like forcing patients to sleep upright for days to realign their internal vapors, probably didn't do much except make them extremely grumpy. You shift in your bed as your 17th century physician rummages through his case. He offers you a draught of diacodium, a syrup made from poppies and spices. It's a milder cousin of laudanum and might actually work, though you risk dependency. Not that anyone's tracking that yet. If you're wealthy, your bedroom is warm, with thick curtains and embroidered sheets. If you're poor, You're in a straw-stuffed bunk, hoping the neighbor's cough doesn't turn into something medievally terminal. Still, sleep matters now more than ever. With cities growing, clocks ticking, and people working longer hours, sleep becomes a medical concern, not just a mystery. Doctors write treatises on it. Philosophers debate it. Poets romanticize it. Sleep is no longer just something that happens. It's something to manage. And you're caught right in the middle of that transformation. Tonight, your doctor recommends warm ale before bed, a foot bath with sage, and his crowning advice: no reading after sunset. Too much mental stimulation. He warns, will stir your bile. You nod solemnly and absolutely ignore him the moment he leaves, cracking open that dog-eared manuscript of the Divine Comedy one more time. Light joke of the night. Try handing your medieval doctor a bottle of melatonin gummies. He'd probably accuse you of witchcraft or worse, claim it's a powerful cure for hiccups, and apply it to someone's ankle. Eventually, your eyes get heavy, whether it's the herbs, the hot wine, or just the weight of the day. You start to drift. The candle burns low, the room settles, and somewhere between the vapor of boiled onions and a quote from Aristotle echoing in your head, you slide into sleep. Not science, not magic, just sleep. And for once, the doctor doesn't wake you to check your pulse. You wake up screaming, or at least gasping, heart hammering, palms slick with sweat. You don't know where you are, and for a moment, neither does your body. There's blood, a lot of it. Your leg is on fire. Men are shouting. Someone's crying. And you're lying flat, held down, as a man with a hacksaw approaches. Welcome back to medieval surgery. This time, you're not just in the room, you're the main event. Unlike your earlier encounter with the barber surgeon, this is far more serious. You've got a crushed leg, or a gangrenous arm, maybe a wound festering from battle, or a farm accident. The diagnosis is simple: cut it off, or you die. And once again, you're wide awake. Mainstream historical fact before the mid-1800s. Surgery was almost always performed without anesthesia. Ether and chloroform were barely whispers in the wind, and nitrous oxide laughing gas was still a sideshow attraction. So you got a belt to bite down on, a strong man to hold your torso, and the closest thing to anesthesia speed. Surgery was a race. A skilled surgeon could amputate a leg in under 2 minutes. The faster he worked, the less time you had to bleed to death, or thrash so hard you snapped your own neck. This brings us to your fringe tidbit. Some surgeons were so famous for their speed that crowds came to watch them perform. One London surgeon, Robert Liston, once completed an amputation in under 30 seconds. Legend says he worked so fast he accidentally sliced through his assistant's fingers and cut the coat of an observer who later died of shock. 3 casualties, 1 surgery, a 300% mortality rate. Historians still argue whether the pain of pre-anesthetic surgery caused long-term trauma, or whether the sheer relief of surviving washed it all away. Patients often passed out during the procedure, whether from blood loss or their brain's mercy blackout. But some remembered every detail and never slept the same again. You're not quite passed out, not yet. The saw bites in, you feel it, you hear it. You smell your own flesh burning as the surgeon presses a red-hot iron to the stump to cauterize it. The scent is unmistakable scorched meat and fear. You want to scream, but your voice is gone. You want to run, but your body is tied down. And then it's over. You don't die, not immediately. Anyway, the surgeon nods, wipes his hands on his apron, and mutters a prayer. You're bandaged with linen soaked in wine or vinegar, maybe stuffed with moss, maybe honey. You're carried to a straw mattress and left to sleep, or whatever version of sleep your body will permit. That night, your dreams are twisted. You drift in and out of consciousness. You hear the muttering of other patients in nearby cots. One is groaning. One isn't breathing at all. The pain surges and fades like ocean waves. And here's the haunting part in this era. Surviving surgery often depended more on your sleep afterward than the procedure itself. Sleep was when the healing began. If infection didn't set in, if the fever didn't climb, if your dreams were calm, then maybe, just maybe, you'd live. Light joke. Imagine taking a medieval patient to a modern hospital post-op. This bed adjusts electronically. The sheets are warm. And here's your morphine pump. They'd weep for joy. Or assume they'd died and gone to heaven. But you're still here. Breathing shallowly. Heart still pounding. You curl into yourself. Careful not to disturb the stump wrapped tightly beneath the covers. And in the dark, in pain, in shock, something beautiful happens. You fall asleep, not because it's comfortable, not because it's peaceful, but because your body, battered and raw, needs it. And even in the darkest corners of history, sleep sometimes wins. You're drifting now, shallow breath, fever dreams, a dull ache throbbing somewhere deep. You shift under your thin blanket and hear a cough from the room next door, then another, then two more. They don't stop. And suddenly, the smell hits you rot, sweat, something sour and wrong. You're not just sick, you're in a city under siege by plague. The year is 1348 or maybe 1665 or maybe 1720. It doesn't really matter, because across centuries, when plague struck, everything changed, including the way people slept. You're inside a house with boarded windows and a rag shoved under the door. A wax seal has been smeared across the wood outside. You're not allowed to leave. No one is. You've been quarantined, a word that comes from the Italian 40 giorni, meaning 40 days. That's how long ships once had to wait offshore before they were allowed into Venice. Just in case. Mainstream historical fact. During plague outbreaks, sleep became both a refuge and a curse. Rest was encouraged for the sick, but isolation meant most people slept alone or far from those they loved. And often, the very act of lying down brought dread. If you fell asleep coughing, you might not wake up at all. You lie in a cramped upper room of your house, a single candle burning low. The shutters are closed. The room is hot. Flies buzz near the basin of water your sister left before she fled. You have bread crusts, some dried apples, and a blanket soaked in vinegar, because someone said it purifies the air, and the nightmares have started. Fringe tidbit. In 17th century London, some plague doctors recommended sleeping upright in a chair to stop the bad air from settling in your lungs. It was thought that lying flat gave the plague a better chance to kill you. Others tied herbs to their beds or burned sulfur before sleep. In Marseille, entire families slept with garlic necklaces. Historians still argue whether plague-era sleep was truly disturbed by infection or if the psychological toll of isolation, death, and dread made rest impossible. Probably both. After all, when death knocks on every door, who really sleeps soundly, you stir in your bed. You're not yet sick, but you're waiting. That's what everyone does during a plague. Wait, listen, worry. You try to fall asleep, but the sounds outside are haunting the rattle of a cart, a bell ringing for the dead, the distant wail of someone who's just realized they're alone now. You pull the covers tighter. Inside homes, people try to reclaim control. Wealthier families created elaborate sleep routines, incense, prayers, letters to God. They believed orderly habits might guard the body. Poorer folk simply collapsed where they could, a corner of the cellar, under a stairwell, next to their animals. Sometimes, people stayed awake all night, fearing they'd miss their last moments. Others gave in and slept as much as they could, because dreams were better than waking life. Now your light joke imagine telling someone quarantined in 1665 that you binge-watched 3 seasons of TV in your pajamas during lockdown. They'd blink. Then ask what channel you used to summon fire sprites. You turn over again. The mattress creaks. You hear the house settling around you, the muffled movements of neighbors behind shared walls. In plague cities, sleep wasn't just personal, it was collective. Whole blocks held their breath at night. No one knew who would wake up. Eventually, your eyes close, not because you're unafraid, but because exhaustion is its own kind of mercy. You dream not of angels or devils, but of fields, of clean water, of laughter, of air that doesn't taste like ash. And when the sun rises, and if you wake with it, you'll count your breath and say a prayer. Because in this house, on this night, sleep is survival. You stir again, not from fever this time, but from something sharper, more mechanical. A clang, a whistle, a metallic hum rolling across brick and soot. The air smells like coal, and the sun is already high. You've overslept, and now you're late. For work, for life, for everything. Because the industrial age doesn't care how tired you are. Welcome to the 19th century, where sleep is no longer just personal. It's a productivity problem. You scramble out of bed. It's a narrow iron frame in a narrow room inside a narrow building packed with other tired bodies. You're in a boarding house. Or maybe a mill dormitory. You live close to the factory where you work 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. You don't sleep because you're tired. You sleep because there's no time not to. Mainstream historical fact: industrialization radically changed human sleep schedules. For the first time in history, time was measured not by sunlight or seasons, but by clocks, cold, impersonal, relentless clocks mounted in factories and town squares. Shift work meant waking up before dawn and working until nightfall, or working all night while others slept. Sleep became commodified. A good worker didn't just show up on time, they managed their sleep to be productive. Oversleeping wasn't just lazy, it was unpatriotic, inefficient, and fireable. And so, the great shortening began. Before this, most people slept in 2 shifts, with a wakeful intermission in between. But in the cities of Manchester, Boston, and Berlin, segmented sleep started to vanish. Workers needed solid rest between grueling shifts, not gentle rituals. Middle-of-the-night prayers were replaced by exhausted blackouts. Fringe tidbit. Some factories assigned knocker-uppers, people who would walk the streets with long sticks and tap on workers' windows to wake them up in time for their shifts. No snooze button, no 5 more minutes. Just a human alarm clock jabbing your pain at 4:30 a.m. and hoping you didn't throw a boot at them. Historians still argue whether industrial sleep loss caused lasting health changes or whether people simply adapted. Some claim this era birthed modern insomnia. Others say our ancestors were already light sleepers, now they just had more reason to complain about it. You drag yourself back home at night, feet aching, lungs full of soot. You eat something hot and fast. You collapse onto your cot. There's no candlelight ritual, no poetry, no ghost stories, just bone-deep fatigue. And yet there's noise. Always noise. Factory towns never truly sleep. Trains run past your street. Steam whistles scream. Horses clop. Neighbors fight. Infants cry. You curl into your blanket and try to block it all out. Your room is dim, maybe shared. If you're lucky, it has a window. If you're not, you sleep in a converted hallway or attic crawl space. Entire families slept in shifts, especially in urban slums, half in bed, half working, rotating like gears in a machine. And now for your light joke. Imagine telling your Victorian foreman you're sleep deprived from screen time. He'd ask what kind of machine a screen is and whether it can be used to increase loom output, of course. The wealthy sleep differently. Industrial barons commission bedrooms the size of chapels. They hire staff to fluff pillows and draw baths. They sip hot milk, read serialized novels by gaslight, and fall asleep under embroidered coverlets. Some even hire personal physicians to monitor their rest, an early form of sleep consulting, because even tycoons need to pretend they aren't dying of stress. But for you, a factory worker, or servant, or clerk, sleep is rationed, not honored. It's squeezed into the gaps of your labor, like a poor man's supper, barely enough to sustain, never enough to savor. You drift off to the sound of metal and voices. You dream of trees, of fresh air, of silence. In your sleep, you walk country lanes that no longer exist. You listen for birds that don't nest here anymore. And when morning comes, you rise with the whistle not because you want to, but because you must. You groan softly, rubbing your eyes. But the room is already bright, not with sun, but with gas lamps, mirrors, and a gilded chandelier that seems to glow with its own smug sense of elegance. The walls are papered in florals. The air smells like talcum powder, and somewhere down the hall someone is playing a harpsichord at an utterly unnecessary hour. Welcome to the Victorian era, where sleep is less about exhaustion and more about manners. You're in a proper bed now, a real one, with turned mahogany legs and at least 4 decorative pillows that serve no known function. The sheets are pressed, the curtains are embroidered, and there's a lace shawl draped dramatically over a nearby chair. Your nightgown has ruffles. Everything has ruffles. And sleep. It's complicated. Mainstream historical fact. Victorians became obsessed with sleep, not just the act, but the aesthetics and morality of it. This was the golden age of sleep manuals, etiquette books, sleep diaries, and earnest discussions about whether your dreams revealed your true moral character. In short, even unconscious, you were being judged. Men were told to sleep with discipline. Women were told to sleep with grace. Children were observed like test subjects in flannel. Your dreams were no longer private. They were data points for your physician, your priest, or your marriage prospects. And if you couldn't sleep, there was a diagnosis for that, too. Nervous exhaustion, sometimes called neurasthenia, became a fashionable affliction, especially among upper-class women. Too much reading, too much thinking, too much fainting at garden parties. Your body was fine, your nerves were tired. The cure: rest, quiet, long walks, and, in extreme cases, something called the rest cure, which involved being confined to bed for weeks, with no books, no visitors, and only milk to drink. Yes, milk. Fringe tidbit: Victorian doctors sometimes recommended fainting couches not for actual fainting, but as socially acceptable places for women to lie down thoughtfully, you know, to process all those overstimulating embroidery projects. Historians still argue whether the era's sleep obsessions stemmed from genuine concern or a growing fear of modernity. The Industrial Revolution had shaken people. Cities were loud, lights were always on, and suddenly, the night was no longer a natural boundary. It was a blur. So people clung to ritual. You had a bedtime routine, complete with hot water bottles, lavender sachets, and a polite journal entry describing how many times you turned in your sleep. Some elite Victorians even visited sleep salons, where you could rest in near total silence under the watchful eye of trained attendants. And yes, there were rules. No spicy food after 7, no poetry that stirred the heart, no thoughts of war or politics or base urges. Above all, no disrupting the sanctity of the drawing room nap. Here's your light joke. Imagine explaining your bedtime TikTok scroll to a Victorian woman in a corset. I lie in bed and look at pictures that move, and then a man whispers health facts into my ears. She'd gasp, faint into her chaise, and then quietly ask for your username. Still, not all was lace and lullabies. Working-class Victorians often lived in single-room homes. Children, parents, and even boarders shared cramped, airless quarters. Street noise poured in through thin walls, and despite the growing obsession with proper sleep, millions were too poor, too crowded, or too exhausted to experience it. They slept in shifts, on benches, in workhouses. Sleep became a dividing line between classes. The wealthy treated it like a spiritual art. The poor treated it like luck. You lie back against your plumped pillows. Maybe your body is soothed by all this order, but your mind buzzes beneath the lace. You can't help but wonder, is this restful or just theatrical? Eventually, the ticking of the mantel clock calms you. The perfume fades. The curtains sway gently in the draught, and you fall asleep beneath the watchful eye of Victorian decorum, knowing full well that even your dreams might be subject to critique. But for tonight, you sleep, upright, well-mannered, and slightly over-perfumed. The room dims, not because the candle's gone out, but because the world around you has shifted again this time forward. The velvet and lace are gone. No more fainting couches. You're lying in a soft, climate-controlled bedroom with blackout curtains, a memory foam pillow, and a phone screen still glowing faintly in your hand. You've returned to the present day, and somehow, you're still not sleeping. Your bed is smarter. Your alarm is digital. Your watch tracks your heart rate, REM cycles, and whether you rolled over more than twice, and yet you're more tired than ever. You stare at the ceiling and wonder why something as basic as sleep feels like an unsolvable riddle. Mainstream historical fact: modern humans are getting less sleep than at any point in recorded history. Most adults need 7 to 9 hours, but many fall short, chronically. The culprits: light pollution, shift work, endless scrolling, stress, noise, and a culture that quietly worships exhaustion as proof of effort. We are the only species that willingly deprives itself of sleep. Lions sleep 18 hours a day and feel no guilt. But you feel lazy if you sleep in. We've taken something essential and turned it into a productivity metric. You sleep with apps now. You journal your dreams into spreadsheets. You buy sound machines that imitate forests you'll never visit. You drink herbal teas with names like Dream Whisper and then check emails while sipping them. And it's not just insomnia, it's sleep anxiety, lying in bed stressing about not being asleep. You perform sleep. You prepare for it like a ceremony. You stage the lighting, time your melatonin, and then wait, staring at the ceiling, wide-eyed. Fringe tidbit: there's an entire field now called sleep hygiene, dedicated to cleaning up your habits so you can drift off more easily. It's full of rules: no screens an hour before bed, no caffeine after 2 p.m, no alcohol, no late dinners, no arguments after dark, no thinking, no worrying, no. Life historians still argue whether modern sleep is uniquely broken or just differently broken. Is our insomnia worse? Or are we just more aware of it because now we measure everything? Your smartwatch tells you got poor quality rest. Thanks, robot. That'll help. Meanwhile, cultures around the world handle sleep differently. In Spain and Italy, siestas are still honored in places. In Japan, falling asleep at your desk in a movie can be seen as a sign of dedication. In some indigenous cultures, dreams are still viewed as sacred guidance, not disposable noise. But for you, you're sandwiched between emails, LED lighting, and a cultural pressure to always be on. Your body is tired, but your brain says, just one more scroll, and here comes your final light joke. Imagine explaining your Bluetooth-enabled smart mattress to a medieval monk. It tracks my tossing and adjusts firmness automatically. He'd mutter a Latin prayer and ask if it's possessed. So what now? You turn off your phone, you dim the lights, you let the fan hum softly beside you, and maybe, just maybe, you remember all those other sleepers across history, the cave dwellers curled beside fires, the peasants on straw, the monks rising at 2 a.m, the samurai with one hand on the hilt, the kings surrounded by spies, the plague victims whispering their last prayers, the factory workers dreaming of daylight. You're not alone. They didn't always sleep well either, but they slept. And so will you. Let's slow down now. You've wandered through caves and castles, across continents and centuries, through the minds of poets and the hands of surgeons. You've slept on straw, silk, tatami, stone, and sometimes not at all. You've heard lullabies, bells, footsteps in the dark, and the haunting hum of a city that never truly rests. And now, you're here, still, breathing, quiet. You've seen that sleep was never just about rest. It was shelter, it was survival, it was status, ritual, medicine, mystery, punishment, and privilege. We've tried everything: herbs, hymns, bloodletting, prayer, featherbeds, ghost charms, and melatonin gummies just to catch a few peaceful hours beneath the stars. And still, night after night, we return to it, because no matter how far we've come, no matter how clever we think we've gotten, sleep remains the great equalizer, the only place where kings, peasants, soldiers, monks, and baristas all meet horizontal, silent, dreaming. So tonight, let yourself soften. Let the air grow still. Feel your thoughts slow to a gentle drift, like dust settling in candlelight. Let your mind loosen its grip, like old curtains drawn back to dusk. And if your dreams come, let them come gently, not as messages or threats, but as stories from a world without clocks. You're safe now. The fire is out, the ghosts are quiet, the bed is yours, and sleep strange, sacred. Human sleep has always been waiting,